Welcome to the Effortless Mindfulness Podcast. I'm Loch Kelly, and here I share talks and deep dialogues with leading experts in the field of meditation, psychology, and neuroscience. Together, we'll explore how everyday people like you and me can live an awakened life of clarity and compassion. You'll also find micro meditations at the end of every podcast episode. If you want to try more of these, you can go to lochkelly.org and find the new wellness and meditation app called Mindful Glimpses and try the 2-week free trial. There you'll experience immediate benefits because the love and peace we are all seeking is already here within us and can be accessed anywhere, anytime. So welcome everyone. It's my great pleasure today to welcome my friend and colleague, Mirabai Starr. So welcome, Mirabai.
Thank you, Loch. Hello, everyone.
So nice to be here with you. And it's just a great time and opportunity to reach out, from where I am to you in New Mexico and get a chance for us to talk about things that we care about and share that with those who are listening.
No, it's such a joy and an honor. I've been following your work for a long time, Loch, and watching it blossom like a lotus. And it's a joy to finally have a real conversation.
Yes, good. Yes, yeah, and recently I know that you've been teaching a bit on grief and the bringing together of, kind of the deep spiritual, the transcendent, and the immanent, the essential nature with the everyday, and especially the deep pain that often isn't talked about or is kind of tried to be spiritualized away, and how, if you might maybe just begin at a deep place by saying a little about what what has moved you to talk about grief, and what you've found to be helpful and kind of in relation to responses you get from people who are helped by what you teach. Yeah.
No, there's a lot in that big, juicy question, Loch. Um, Actually, I love it when this happens. I had a little epiphany as you were talking just now,
Yeah.
and you were speaking about transcendence and immanence. So, in case this is feeling too technical or academic for people, um, just that understanding that we have in our bones, that ultimate reality both transcends everything that we experience through our five senses and in our regular lives. There's this oneness that is
Mm.
much bigger than we ordinarily perceive, but we get it, we know it. But also that the sacred is infused in every cell of our bodies and in every moment of our ordinary experience, and they're both true: the transcendent and the immanent,
Mm.
the non-dual and the embodied, right?
Yeah.
And so when you just spoke about grief and pain
Mm.
as a place that often is sort of ignored because it doesn't feel spiritual enough to some people, I saw it as this
Mm.
portal, this
Mhm.
like portal or this nexus, like Indra's net in
Mm.
the in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, I guess, because in the wisdom literature of India, and Indra's net is this metaphor, this myth of this great net where every place where it ties together, what would that be called? The nexus
Yeah.
of every place where the net is tied has a jewel,
Mm.
and that jewel reflects all the rest of the net into
Mm.
infinity. And so it's almost like grief becomes experience of grief and loss becomes this luminous jewel that reflects both the immanence and the transcendence of
Right.
everything that is, and it lets us in to a deeply sacred realm, and yet it is completely ordinary, if you will, in
Mm.
the sense that loss happens to all of us,
Right.
often multiple times. So the
Yeah.
question is, when we experience shattering losses, like the kind that really rock the foundations of our reality and remake us,
Mhm.
how do we walk through that portal? How do we say yes to that when the culture at large is saying, get away from it, take some drugs,
Mm.
eat some sugar, shop some more, whatever you can, or do spiritual practices with all
Yeah,
your might so that you won't feel your feelings.
that's right. Go beyond and realize it's all change and it's all coming and going and it's all empty, and being attached to, people is an attachment, and, this kind of thing that just gets a little bit, you know, divides our fullness of our wholeness of our heart and our experience, and the preciousness of the human relationships and community, and the caring about somebody, has to bring up, when loss happens, has to bring up some grief. Certainly animals, elephants are really known to be very clearly animals that show their grief
Yeah,
very clearly. We all have this as a natural, um, a natural dimension of caring in life. Yeah.
that's exactly right. And I think we're supposed to get attached to each other.
Mm. Yes. Yes. And so the willingness to risk that, being attached and to love, and then requires the capacity, which does come from some spiritual dimension, some direct experience, not, intellectual or belief system or intellectual understanding, but a real feeling that everything's interconnected, and a real feeling of the unborn. There's an unborn dimension that's born and passes away, and it's unborn and it's eternal, and it's born and we have loss and it hurts, and it's unborn, and, so kind of this interweaving of the both and of life that, that allows us to feel and to kind of be shaken by real full human experiences.
Well, that's what I love about your work, Locke,
Mm.
is that you're one of the voices right now who are singing that song of the interconnection between immanence and transcendence, between non-dual awareness as a lived reality versus a concept or
Mhm.
theory, and the integration of our human experience as sacred and meaningful of heart and mind, which I think is really the core of Buddhism. Unfortunately, the boys club, as I sometimes call it,
Yep.
has emphasized the mind part
Yeah.
because somehow
Yeah.
it feels more controlled or
Uh-huh.
controllable. I
Yeah.
don't know what, but you're bringing back the heart. And I have to say, to hear you as a privileged white dude
Mhm.
affirming the beauty of the body
Yeah.
and the power and wisdom of the emotions is really important. So I appreciate you using your mic that way.
Yes. Yes, thank you. And you also, I resonate with your coming forth with this and even going deeper, and that's what kind of said, "Aha, we've got to talk,"
Yeah.
because we're both resonating with this kind of, as we see this mental health crisis during COVID, and people are isolated and they're not, connecting on a physical. They're not giving hugs. They're not in their bodies. And then, slowly, people get more in their heads, get more worried and fearful and projecting, and all of a sudden things just start breaking down, mind and psyche, and isolation and fear, and then some, you know, so that how do we find the coming back together and the ground of being that has been what all sacred traditions have sought for and have exclaimed, and yet the modern fast moving world is kind of skating over it. So there's no reason why it can't be brought into, contemporary language and pointers and metaphors, and
Mhm.
connect the ancient literature as you do by translating these amazing mystical texts, um, where there was so much passion and love of the divine. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. It's true. The wisdom jewels of all the world's spiritual traditions are still there.
Mm.
And at the same time that I am really busy dismantling religiosity
Mhm.
and institutionalized um, religious systems,
Mhm.
I am very interested in safeguarding those luminous jewels that lie
Mm.
at the heart of all the world's great traditions. And yes, they often take the form of mystical poetry.
Yeah.
All of the traditions have these ecstatic and sometimes ecstasy drenched in pain or
Mhm.
pain washed with ecstasy.
Yeah.
They really come together in the poetry of the mystics, that heartbreaking longing for the union with the divine, with the
Mhm.
separation and the cry of anguish. And there's something in those poems, and they exist in all the world's traditions that I know of. Less in the indigenous traditions. There's less of a sense of separation from the source.
Right.
But in
Yeah.
all the other traditions, there's this ache of
Of
yearning.
one.
Yeah. And I think there's something in it for all of us right now.
Yeah. I agree. I think that we don't want to move too quickly to go beyond the seeker to being a finder. That there's the heart's longing is needs to be fanned. The flames of those of that, because it keeps keeping everything juicy. And being very um, curious. Curiously expressing different forms of love. Really in the world. Any particular, I don't want to put you on the spot, any particular poetry that comes to mind, maybe even a phrase or
Oh,
two from you could read from one of the mystics you
oh.
translated, right?
Oh,
You
what
know,
of mystics I translated? Sure.
or your own. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, no, no, I was just looking at my shelf of contemporary mystical poets.
Oh, good.
None of
Okay.
them call themselves mystics, but I think
Okay.
they
Oh,
are.
good.
Like,
Yeah, wherever your heart and hand go.
oh my gosh, okay. How about this one? This is
Oh.
Zaina Hashem Beck,
Oh, okay.
and she is a Lebanese American poet.
Mm.
I will read one stanza. So this is a poem by Zaina Hashem Beck called Piano, and it's about refugees. It's about a refugee camp. It's about people living disconnected from their homeland. And you can look at that, as I do, as a metaphor for the exile in our own souls that we
Mm.
suffer from, this sense of
Mm.
being disconnected from our spiritual, yeah, belonging. But it's also, this is again the both and, Locke.
Mm.
It's also very much a political poem and a poem
Mhm.
about actual displacement
Yeah.
of refugees. So let's see, how about this one? There's six stanzas. This is the second to last one. And each stanza starts with "Dear God," and then there's like this off the wall question that the poet asks God. Dear God, I love you. By this I mean, do you have another name? By this I mean, there are armies who shout your name and burn houses and pianos. Come back.
Mm.
It's called Piano, and it means much more. I'm making myself cry. It means much more when you read the whole thing, but there's some way in which, and I'm glad you asked me to read something.
Mm.
There's some way that poetry,
Mhm.
unlike discursive language, unlike theology,
Mm.
philosophy, much of which is very beautiful and illuminating, but poetry is visceral,
Mhm.
and it like knocks on the door of the heart,
Mhm.
and it keeps knocking until the heart
Mm.
opens.
Yeah.
And if we stay with it and use poetry as a kind of contemplative practice, like Lectio Divina,
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
Christian tradition, sacred reading, if we stay with it in a contemplative way as a practice, then not only can we allow that knocking to open the doors of the heart, but we can actually step in to the
Mhm.
landscape that that poem is evoking.
Yes.
And that's the
Beautiful.
power of mystical
Yeah.
language.
Yeah. That's yeah, and mysticism kinda gets a bad rap sometimes, as if it's the opposite of rational, it's as if it's, uh, primitive or as if it's religious, you know, kind of making things up, fantasy,
Right.
almost religious just fantasy ideas about, the world is magical and magical thinking but, the way you use it and the people you bring forth, it really means it's the Western word for contemplative,
Yeah.
awakened consciousness, true seeing, and, I love that the opening the door. I think that's been one of my interests. What opens the door from the current constellation of consciousness and our search outside and trying to keep it all together to open the door of the heart, open the door of the soul, or open the door of to the already awake, ineffable, unconditional, loving presence that we are at root, so that we can not just experience it but be it.
Mhm.
What are those tools? In poetry certainly is one that you bring forth.
Exactly. It's like what you're talking about, Luck, is like that. It seems to me that very subtle. John of the Cross talks about the subtlety of this
Mm,
whole mystical journey. That very subtle state that can happen when we allow ourselves to show up
mm,
completely.
yeah.
As completely as we can with all of the distractions of the human predicament,
Mhm,
but it's not a dramatic. That's the other kind of cliche about mysticism, is that we have these dramatic experiences of union
mhm,
with God and the
mhm,
drop of water melting into the boundless sea, and I
mhm.
mean, sometimes those experiences happen and they're
Yeah, yeah.
ecstatic and they're amazing, but often the mystical experience, or what you might call the contemplative moment, is very subtle and
Mhm,
refined, and you have to kind of lean in to even know
mhm.
that it's happening. It's often afterwards that we go, "Oh,
Yeah.
that was exquisite. That was
Yes.
a moment of forgetting that I'm separate."
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, some bringing forth the ancient maps and, of the territory so that when we have those subtle, uh realizations that we don't think it's just a gap of nothing or silence. It's just not just absence. And then oh yeah, what were we doing again? Like and then miss it.
I
So as soon as you have that, the pointers and the map that says, well, there's this silence that isn't just the absence of sound. There's a stillness that is the quality of that which doesn't come and go.
Mm,
Can you feel that? And then inviting people to directly perceive and realize and be and rest, and then include everything
mm,
from there. Yeah.
exactly, and you know what? Grief and loss are it's one of those places that
Mhm.
can invite us into that deep sacred stillness, because we're
Mhm.
so taken down, we're
Yeah.
so stripped
Yeah.
of all of the extraneous distractions by death, say, by being in the presence of death, which of course is
Yeah.
not the only version of loss, but it's a powerful one.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that sometimes we find ourselves in the presence of death, just abiding in that, what I call that holy hush.
Mhm.
And we can detect the fragrance of the sacred infusing that emptiness. I love that Roshi Joan Halifax
Mhm.
defines shunyata, that essential
Mhm.
Buddhist understanding of emptiness, as not just blank, like you're saying,
Right.
it's the I say it's overflowing with plenitude, but she defines it as boundlessness. Boundlessness. It's such a more generous term than, and grief does bring us there.
Yeah. And, interestingly, I'm also of that, in terms of defining emptiness, firstly, almost as interconnectedness. In other
Mm,
words, that it, the word means empty of a separate sense of self,
right.
which means interconnected. But two beautiful metaphors from the North Indian Mahamudra tradition is that the word svi, which is the root word of shunyata, SVI, it means the invisible life force within a seed that helps it grow into a tree.
Hmm. Wow. Love that.
And then the other image that's used is the potential in a woman's womb.
Mm. Wow. Beautiful.
So those are the invisible. So it has that quality of what you think of empty cup, meaning invisible, but then it has the opposite of empty cup in its fullness and aliveness
Yeah.
and potential to appear as things
Mhm.
in distinct form.
Yes,
Yeah.
in the Jewish mystical tradition, it's Ein Sof. Ein Sof is that unitive reality from which all things arise, and every spiritual tradition I know of has some cosmological story where that oneness basically gets bored with itself
Right.
and wants to know itself. In the
Yes.
Quran, I was a treasure and I longed to be known. So I created all that is. And in Judaism, that it's the explosion, the big bang of, the vessels. So the Holy One wants to know itself as love,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
distills itself,
Right.
condenses itself into this vessel, like makes itself
Right.
from infinite to just infinitesimal. And that,
Yeah.
but it's the radiance is too great for the vessel, and the vessel shatters. That's what creates all that we know. Everything we know is a shattering.
Mm-hmm.
And our task as human beings, it goes on to say in that cosmological story in Judaism, is to restore that vessel to wholeness. That's the human task. And we do that through every act of justice. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's all interconnected. We
Yes.
we are co-creators of wholeness in this universe, and what we do matters.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was the feeling as I, spent time in India and kind of was deeply getting some of the direct experience. The thought would cross my mind or others, well, will you stay and join a monastery or something? And the flourishing and the flowering of those initial realizations were, no, I want to go back to New York City and help people
Yeah.
who are who are homeless, and meditate there, that. So there's something that is so important to keep that definition of awakening or enlightenment or mystical, realization, that it is love, really,
Yes,
that
that
it's not just freedom from suffering, but it's, the back into bodhicitta, or, the awake consciousness is the compassionate, unconditional, loving, basic goodness.
exactly. The bodhisattva path is not some injunction that you should do if you want to get to heaven. It's
Mm.
it's a natural outflowing of love,
Yeah.
rooted
Yeah.
in the experience of interconnection, not the
Yes.
philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're inspiring me to share, that probably one of my primary inspirations for doing what I'm doing is when my father, when I was 18, he had brain cancer in the left lobe of his brain, and when they found it was the size of a lemon. So it's very severe. So he had surgery. That summer, I went off to freshman year in college, would come back. And then he started, when he came back um, for Christmas, he was like bringing me his workbooks because he was now doing second grade level, learning to read again. And he was like, look what I've done. And so all of a sudden it was like the father became the child, the father. And then he started getting better and he was talking about going back to work and then had an aneurysm and passed away right before I went to sophomore year. And it was just, in going there, none of my friends really had experienced loss like that of a parent. Some had had divorce, which was loss, but nobody had had death of significant. So nobody quite knew how to talk to me. And then even when I went to the kind of Freudian psychotherapy center, I lasted only a couple sessions as the guy just took notes. And I was like, okay, that's not going to help. So in the as I was in the middle of a clear like February night in that winter, coming out of the library and just feeling like overwhelmed by grief, just like, oh, just, and heard this voice, which was, I could understand as a part of me or something that said, I don't know if I can take this much longer. And what I did is I looked up. I said, well, who just said that? And my awareness just went like, well, what's that? Who's that? And it went up. And then I looked up at the sky, and my awareness just went up to the sky and kind of mingled and merged with this vast universe, and then kind of embraced it. And I just started crying and just, but felt such a relief. It's just like I had been grieving by trying to figure it out, holding on to it, trying to talk to people, and not having the capacity, being away at college and nobody, everyone's like, well, let's go have a beer, like it
Yes.
wasn't. So this opened up to this dimension of universal support. So it didn't feel like just
Mm.
a release, but it felt like a embrace. And so that was kind of the door for me, was grief.
Exactly, and it is for so many people, but
Yeah,
first of all, what a beautiful story, Luck.
yeah, thank
Thank you for sharing it,
yeah.
and maybe some of your listeners have heard it, but I have
Mm,
not,
mhm,
and it's deeply moving. And yes, that is a beautiful example of the universality of grief as a portal to mystical experience,
mhm. Yeah.
and how our pain of missing our loved ones who have died, for
Mm,
instance, or whatever we may be grieving, or whomever we may be grieving, seems to be intimately linked with our soul's essential longing,
mhm,
longing
mhm,
to return to its source, to remember where we belong, that there is a love longing that burns in us. And
mhm,
when we experience great loss in the world, in our lives, it can evoke that soul wound. What Teresa of Avila, who I've had the great
mm.
privilege of translating from Spanish, Teresa of Avila calls it the beautiful wound.
Uh-huh.
The
Wow.
beautiful wound.
Yeah, beautiful one. Yeah,
It's
that's
not a
lovely.
problem to be solved. It's
No.
an
It's not.
invitation.
Yeah, it almost makes the separation on that human, mental, personal level so much clearer. It's like, "Oh, I'm so separate because 'cause I'm missing somebody," and then that separate sense of self is just trying to soothe itself and figure it out, and in this case, it's just like, "Okay, better go to something," just let go, just open up, just look outside, looks for something subtler or deeper or wider or higher or lower, and it just for great grace
Grace.
to just have the good fortune of not even trying to do anything, but all of a sudden just showed up. Yeah.
Yes, and it doesn't change everything.
Mhm.
It doesn't fix anything because there's nothing broken.
Yes,
It's
right.
it's not a broken thing, our broken hearts, exactly. paradoxically, it's a very sacred landscape that we get to inhabit if we choose to. So those moments of unitive experience are, yes, it's grace. It's an incredible blessing. It does change everything, and whatever it is we're grieving is still gone, and we still have to learn to live with that amputation and find a new center of gravity. So it's both and, as you said, it's both true that the someone we love or something that was important to us is gone and we're
Mm.
shattered, and it won't come back. That
Mhm.
limb won't grow back.
Mm.
And it is true that by virtue of, not despite that experience of shattering loss, we have experienced the truth of interconnection.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's about as as beautiful a way to kind of sum up all we've been talking about, and really feel that beautiful expression that you are in the
Mm,
world, and how
mm.
you live it, and it kind of comes forth poetically through your being. So I really appreciate our time to connect here, and
Me too. Me
uh,
too. Thank you. Thank you, Locke.
thank you.
And
Mirabai. So,
blessings on all of you, whatever losses you may be navigating.
mhm.
May your heart find some kindness and some sense of belonging, knowing that countless other beings have suffered and are suffering right now. This a similar loss, and that you belong to each
Mm.
other. We belong to each other. So may we find our way home in the midst of these challenges right now, or belonging.
Mm. Great. Thank you so much.
You're
All
welcome.
right.
Thank you too, Luck.
Be well, Mirabai.
You too.
This next mindful glimpse is what I call a non dual giving and receiving practice. You can do this practice by yourself, sending compassionate energy to someone in your life, or you can do it sitting across from a friend. It is the same as the traditional relative level Tonglen practice, except that when you breathe into your heart, don't stop at taking the suffering into your body. Instead, you allow it to continue through your heart space to the support of awake awareness behind your heart. Then you feel the support of awake awareness energy coming back into your body. Next, you feel the loving awareness energy go out to another person in front of you and connect to the awake awareness within and also behind that person. As you breathe in, you feel their ignorance and suffering come back to and through your body and back to the support of awake awareness that has your back. The key experience could be summarized this way: awake awareness has your back. We can learn to receive and give from here. So let's take a few minutes to glimpse open hearted awareness for yourself and give and receive from here. Sit comfortably, eyes open or closed, and simply be aware of all of your senses. Notice the activity of thinking in your head. Now unhook local awareness from thoughts in your head. And next, let local awareness move down through your neck and into your chest. and know directly from within your upper body. Become familiar with this direct knowing from within. It neither looks down from your head nor looks back up to your thoughts. Feel the awareness and aliveness together. Rest without going to sleep, and stay aware without going to thought to know. Now notice a feeling of an open heart space from within the center of your chest. Feel as if you've relocated from head to this open heart space, from which you are now knowing and aware. Notice that you can invite and welcome any thoughts down so you can remain at home in your heart and still have information from the office of your head come to you as if by Wi-Fi. Be here, receive light with your eyes, and look out from the eyes of open-hearted awareness. And now, feel how local awareness can move back through the door of your open heart to the space behind your body. Surrender local awareness behind your body until local awareness mingles with spacious awareness that's already aware. Wait until you are knowing from the timeless, spacious, thought-free awareness. Now notice that this field of awareness energy is also including your whole body. Notice how local awareness is also moving forward and looking out at the world through your heart space. Be aware from this field of awareness energy, behind, within, and in front. It's simultaneously spacious and pervasive, a continuous field of interconnected awareness energy. Notice the awareness energy is both outside and inside at the same time. Without going to thought, ask, what does open-hearted awareness know? Simply let go and let be. Rest in this new knowing and flowing. See from being. Notice the loving awareness happening effortlessly. Enjoy. Thanks for listening. This podcast is offered freely. And instead of asking for a donation, I'd like to see if we can mutually support each other by asking you to try the free trial of our new app, Mindful Glimpses. You'll find it in the App Store or at lochkelly.org. There, we offer daily micro-meditations and in-depth programs to support a new way of awakening to the love and clarity that are already within you.